Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. All right, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. Today I have a good friend of mine, Marc S. Marc, I've known you pretty much since I got clean. And I remember you had one of those stories that was totally captivating. You know, you had a story that was something that, is out of a movie. And throughout those years, I've seen you constantly gone to meetings, stayed involved in vigilante and recovery. Can we start from the beginning?
Sure, my pleasure. I guess the beginning was in the mid-'60s.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in California.
What part?
Los Angeles area, the San Gabriel Valley. My mom was a school teacher. My dad owned an auto parts store, a garage, a body and fender shop.
Mm-hmm.
So it was upper middle class. We had a house with a swimming pool, and I'd like to say I had a very normal upbringing, but I was the only thing that probably wasn't normal.
Yeah, your parents were normal.
Yeah. I mean, I got in trouble in school. I was very extroverted. I guess my first addictions were, athletics. I remember I was just watching the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
And I was a pole vaulter, and I had
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I ran high hurdles. I was all-star pitcher in Little League. And then I became a surfer, and that became my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the mid-'60s, I got introduced to LSD. It was actually the first drug I took back then.
Wow.
Drugs.
Before weed?
Yeah. Back then, there wasn't a lot of drugs going on. It was, like I said, upper middle class, and this was before it got like it is nowadays. And a friend of mine, I rode motorcycles at the time. I lived in the hills. We're behind the house, and we were jumping and going up hills and getting crazy on motorcycles. And one of the guys from that clique went up to San Francisco to go to college, and he came down to visit, and he talked about LSD and how he watched the sun come up green, and he was crying red tears, and how mind expanding, and it sounded like something very interesting. And he went back up to San Francisco. I kind of started looking for that drug, and there was an old surfer friend of mine who was, older. He was in college. I was, just in high school at the time, and he had actually been given it. It was still legal at the time. He had been given his first drug in a psychology class, at the university.
Wow.
Yeah, he was hanging out in Hollywood in the Sunset Strip, and we went there, and I took my first trip.
Mm-hmm.
I started going every weekend to the music scene, the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Trip, the Sea Witch was one of my main clubs. I found the same people that took this LSD, smoked weed, so I started smoking weed as well.
Mm-hmm.
And started, I guess, really starting to become anti-authority and rebelling. It was the mid-'60s. We were against this war going on in Vietnam. There was a lot of activism going on where I was hanging out on the Strip. I got really involved in a lot of that. What happened is back then there was dress regulations. You had to have your hair cut short and shaved up the back. And in my junior...
For what, in high school?
In high school, yeah. There was dress regulations. And already, because I was hanging out in Hollywood in that scene, I was probably the first one in my school to wear bell-bottoms,
Mm-hmm.
I think getting ridiculed a bunch for the way I was dressing and didn't feel part of. And, these hipsters, these beatniks, whatever you wanted to call them, that I was hanging out with in the weekend at the Sunset Strip, became my friends and my family, kind of. And I remember it was my junior year, Easter vacation. I had let my hair grow as long as you could just about. And then we had the 2 weeks or 10 days off, and I squared off my hair, and I came to school, and you weren't allowed to block off the back of your hair, and
Wow.
I got kicked out of school until I got a haircut. I came home. My mom said, I'm a school teacher. I was hoping that they would support me, that I should have the right to wear my hair the way I wanted to. My mom said she can't go against the school board. And then my dad, who was an ex-Marine Iwo Jima survivor from World War II, he came home, and when he found out, he said, well, I'll tell you a better one, get your hair cut or get out of the house. So
very different times, huh?
Yeah. So at the time, I had a 55 Chevy Nomad that, was left over from my surfer days. And I was like 17 years old, and I packed some clothes and jumped in it and went down to the Sunset Strip. I guess then, the people that were the freaks, the hipsters, I don't think the word hippie was out at the time, but they became my family, and buying and selling drugs was the way we live. And I just got more and more involved. I guess what really started it off is I found this guy that had first told me about drugs. When I moved up to San Francisco, he had become really good friends with Osley. So I started, I would hitchhike up the coast all the way to San Francisco, hang out at 8-Ashbury, then buy a couple hundred tabs of, there were caps back then, we had the cap at acid, and fly back to where I lived, and I was dealing, LSD. And right after my 18th birthday, it became illegal. I think Art Linkletter's son had jumped out of a window on a 10th floor building or something, thinking he could fly on acid, and there was a lot of controversy going on, and it became a felony. And I was dealing it now for a year or something. Right after it became a felony, I was arrested for sales of dangerous drugs. I had just turned 18, and in fact, I was the first person, I believe, in the state of California to get arrested for LSD after it became a felony. When I went to in front of the judge, and he kind of thought or said that, well, you don't have any record or anything. I mean, I had gone to juvenile hall for some pot and some incorrigible, but I didn't have any real record. He said, but we got to make an example of you, and he, because you're one of the first ones. We can't just give a slap on the wrist for this. And he sent me to state penitentiary. I walked in there, a long hair hippie with my hair parted down the middle, and being the chameleon that most of us drug addicts are. It took me no time at all. I found a friend of mine who, I actually, by that time I was already into ejecting methadone, and I'd given this guy like his wings, and I'm probably the only Jewish kid in the whole world to ever join the Aryan Brotherhood. But, that's what...
Did you tell them they didn't know you were Jewish, right?
Nobody really asked or cared, I mean, it was just if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get on back. And that's how the penitentiary was, and these guys had it all going on, the home brew, the getting good food, whatever. And I just fell into that. And, I came out of there with my hair combed back, thinking I had got my first tattoo inside, I remember, when I first got sent and got out of the bus at the prison, Tracy, in Northern California, and they took me up to the third tier in the Receiving and Guidance Center. And I remember looking out the window at the barbed wire and the gun towers and all these crazies down on the yard. And I was really confused, I wasn't a thief. I wasn't a murderer. All I was doing was having fun and helping my friends get some of the stuff so they could have fun too, And I couldn't understand why this was happening to me, And while I was in, the one thing that a bunch of the guys were always talking about was shooting up opiates, heroin, and how you could just stare at your shoelaces for the next 8 hours and be completely happy. The way I felt when I did get out, I I mean, in the beginning, drugs were all about, changing the world and writing and art and all the things that I'd been into. And by the time I got out of that prison, I was, looking for that drug just to numbify my life and not feel anymore. I was scared. I was scared every time I saw a police car. I couldn't understand how, society or, it was always somebody else. It was the principals when I was in school, my parents, then the courts, the judges, the parole officers.
How long did you do in the penitentiary for that charge?
Believe it or not, I got paroled after 3 months on an immediate parole because I really didn't have a record. And my mom's another school teacher whose husband was a lawyer. He went up for my parole board hearing, and they laid a pretty good rap down, and they gave me what was called an immediate parole, and they let me out. It seems like I was always in for the summer. I think that was the summer of the Monterey Pop Festival, and the next year I missed Woodstock because I was in, I couldn't make it on the streets because I wasn't about to stop using drugs. I wasn't about to change my lifestyle and not be this free-thinking hipster, that I thought I was. And like I said, I got out of that prison that first time and went looking for that drug heroin, I had started shooting up speed. When I was like 17, I had driven cross-country to New York City with a bunch of grass. I was already a runaway living on the Strip. And in California, if you were under 18, you'd get arrested for curfew and a lot of things. And I had met some people. We had a big crash pad in Hollywood and people hanging out and getting high and buying and selling drugs. And what happened is I met some guys from New York that told me they could get $30 an ounce for pot. And I mean, it went for $10 an ounce in California. But if you go down to Tijuana, which had become my thing, you could buy it for... You could buy a kilo of it for $100, So
Jeez.
I went across country and stayed in the village and started, selling pot to get by. And I lived the summer in Greenwich Village at the Village Plaza Hotel. One of the things that happened, I thought I hated needles. With people that used to shoot up at the apartment I had in, where I lived in California, the house we were renting. I couldn't even be in the same room. I couldn't look at it. Mm-hmm. But the first day that I was in New York City, you could park on one side of the street from like 8 at night to 8 in the morning, and the other side for the other, 12 hours. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, I didn't want to get any parking tickets. I ended up getting 1 million. They were in my mom's name. The cars, so luckily she never went to New York or had to get responsibility for all those tickets. But what happened is I got up early the next morning to move my car to the other side of the street. And as I was going around the block, all of a sudden I bumped into a couple friends of mine that I knew from Los Angeles that were there doing the same thing. They asked me for a ride, and I said, sure. Where are you going? We're going to the East Village. We're going to trade some pot for some speed and do up some speed, We went across, we went up to this guy's apartment, artist, all paintings everywhere. As soon as I saw the needles and the spoons and everything, I started, I didn't want to, these guys were older than me, and when they said, you want to do some speed, I said, I don't know, maybe, but when the paraphernalia came out, it was like I was going to, I was thinking in my head all these excuses. I have to go looking for a job. I have to go see my uncle in Long Island. But they didn't even ask me. They just came over and said, can you hit yourself, or you want me to hit you, So I just kind of like turned my head, and it wasn't painful. And when the rush came on, I remember getting up and walking in circles going, wow, this is me. I love this shit.
How old were you?
17.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I remember I used to write. I remember writing like a poem the night that I done that, because after the first one, I remember I learned to shoot myself up, eyedropper, the old eyedropper with a baby pacifier on the end. And, I remember writing a poem about, I felt like a virgin that just lost their virginity, Although, like I said, I'd done speed, but we would stay awake talking for hours, and I wrote on it and painted on it and did all these extroverted things. By the time I got out of jail that first time, I was looking for something just to kill the pain of what I was feeling and how I thought I'd been, done wrong by society and the prison system and everything. Because I didn't want to change my lifestyle, I couldn't stay free. I stayed on the streets like 90 days, and I got violated and went back for another summer for like 3 months, and then I got out, and a few months later, I'd got involved in some guy had ripped me off. We did a dope deal when we went down to Mexico. And anyway, I took a gun. I was going to college, because I had to work or get a job or go to school. So I was going to Mount San Antonio College, and I went looking for the guy, and I had a pistol, and I ended up, shooting like 7 shots at him as he ran down the hill. I was saying double. I'd taken a bunch of barbiturates to get the courage, and I didn't hit him, but, I got arrested. I ditched the gun, so they didn't find the gun, but they got me, and I got violated for assault with a deadly weapon, and I ended up going to prison for a year. At the end of that year, it was never in my mind that I wasn't going to do the things that were getting me locked up. I'd just be more slick the next time. I remember I kind of like decided in there that I can't stay on the streets in California. I would make it for 3 months. I'd get sent back to jail. I decided I'd split the country. I remember once I was given parole, and my parole officer came to visit me and make out a parole list. You're going to work because all you do up there at college is deal drugs and get high, and you're going to have to get a job, and you can't hang out in the parks and where other drug addicts are, and we got a guy that's going to be looking between your toes for needle marks, and do you agree to all these parole stipulations? And of course, I wanted to get out. I agreed. And then as he was walking out of the room, his name was Kaysen, and I said, Mr. Kaysen, let me ask you a question. If I leave the United States, are you guys going to come looking for me? Looked at me and he said, Mark, you're a pain in the ass to the state of California. You're nothing but paperwork for me. And, if you split, just don't come back before your 23rd birthday. I was like 20 years old at the time. I was under the Youth Act, Youth Authority, parole expires. And then as he was walking out the door, I said, I was just wondering, I'm not going to do that or anything. As I was walking out the door, he turned around and said to me, Mark, be careful of the shit over there. It's a lot more pure than what you're used to. Don't kill yourself, And he knew I was going to go, and that's what happened. I got out of jail after doing like a year's time, and my friends took me to a party, that they were having for me, and have you got high yet? And I was already stoned, and no, and I was taking this and taking that, and like 3 days later, I kind of like woke out of the haze I was in with needle marks, and there was no way. I was supposed to go meet my parole officer. There's no way I could do that. I went and got a passport and left the United States. In my mind, it was just because they had my number in California. The narcs knew me, and the judges and the parole officers and all that shit. But what I've learned since is wherever you go, there you are. And I just to get in trouble with the law almost everywhere I went. I was in England and almost got busted, and these guys told me the next time they see me, so I split there, and I was on my way to Morocco, and I ended up on an island called Ibiza, a real cool hippie destination.
What made you go there?
It was on the way to Morocco, and it was just full of hipsters. That was just part of the scene. If you were I don't think we were using the word hippies, or people were using that to, but beatniks, whatever we were, there was a big group of those people going to Ibiza. And I went there, and, I set up shop and started dealing acid and hash, and, because I started doing hash when I went to Europe and living the way I was living. I got arrested in Ibiza. Actually, I went over to the neighboring island, Formentera. We went over because somebody had said there was a French guy that had heroin on the other island, and we went looking for it. Thank God, when I got out and became free, my mind opened up, because I had really had a lot of stupid racist views that I adopted in prison, and it was kind of like what you had to do to survive, you had to click up, you had to be with your people. And I saw this black guy named George that I knew, and I asked him if he had any downers, because we'd been shooting speed. I remember on the boat ride over, I was in the bathroom with this chick from Amsterdam who had been living with me, and we were shooting up speed. And he said, well, no, all I have are these psychedelic cakes, And I said, are they downers? He says, well, they kind of are in the beginning. He had traveled all over the world and had, belladonna and yaga and all this stuff mixed into cakes. And
What do you mean cakes?
he made, little...
like a real cake?
Or
oh, yeah,
a
okay.
Little,
like a dessert, yeah.
Like a cookie to eat, you
Okay.
know? Yeah. So, I took it and completely kind of like lost my mind. I was, I'd had hallucinations on acid for sure, but you always kind of knew they were hallucinations. Mm-hmm. This was unreal. I literally thought that I saw people that I lived with in Ibiza that weren't even on the island, and they were walking next to me, and I was talking with them, and then they'd flow down and like melt and go through a wall, and people's faces in trees which were blowing, and I was just out of my mind. And I think I went to try and go into somebody's home, I thought it was a bar, and that's where my friends were. And anyway, I ended up getting arrested, and I had like 4 ounces. I had a leather pouch, and I had like 4 ounces of my personal smoking stash, an ounce of Afghani, an ounce of Lebanese, and an ounce of magic Moroccan. I had like 4 different types of hash, and they arrested me and they took me back to Ibiza, and they threw me in the old prison on top of the hill. On my 21st birthday, February 3rd, 1970, I had a girlfriend that was visiting me every day. This is like a dungeon, a small jail. There were, maybe 30 prisoners or 25 prisoners, and we had, cells around the walk. You had to walk down the steps from where the police office was, and it was a dungeon under the ground. One side was a church, one side was a school, one side was the director of the school's house or something, and the backside was the jail offices, and anyway, I got thrown into jail there. And I was facing, a couple years. Wow,
a couple years. So wait, they were looking at a couple years just for being intoxicated in public?
No, for
the
possession of hash,
the hash.
And it was a very strict Catholic country at the time, and they weren't very hip. But it's for having all those drugs that I had. And they were, I remember when they arrested me and they took me over to Ibiza, La Guardia Civil came in, and I had a key to the house I was living at. And there was like a kilo of Afghan hash and a few hundred acid trips and mescaline and whatever I was dealing at the time. And
What's mescaline like? Because I've heard of it in like Fear and Loathing, but I never knew.
It's another psychedelic. It's just a derivative from the peyote plant, I think it's synthetic from the peyote plant.
Gotcha.
But anyway, what happened was my girlfriend who was visiting me every day, she came up to see me on my birthday, and she brought like 2 bottles of cognac, one for the 2, there's like 2 guards there in the daytime, and, they gave me one, but they gave the guards, so they'd let me have one. And then we were getting drugs inside. There was a guy called Negrid, we called him the Fat Man. He would do our shopping for us. If you didn't have money, you'd get like 39 pesos a day to live on from the government. But I had money, so I could shop for anything I wanted. And I was in a cell with a Dutch junkie named Bobby, a crazy Spanish guy named Trunco, who had been like a circus performer. And he was built like a tree trunk. That's why he had the name. He was like an acrobat in a circus. The 3 of us were in a cell. And my girlfriend, when she brought me the bottle of whiskey, she said, look in the candy. And I unrolled the candy. There was pieces of hash. And then, the guy who did the shopping would go to the pharmacy. You could buy sleeping pills, Dormidina, and Boostate, which was speed. You could just buy the pills from the pharmacy. And I had him buying that stuff from me the whole time I was in jail for like a month at that time, waiting to go to court. We went down to the cell, and Bobby played the silver flute, and we had some cans. We were making tablas and music and smoking hash, and we'd eaten a bunch of pills. And the two guards, she had given a bottle of cognac so I could get a bottle of cognac. They had gotten drunk, and I don't know whether they stole chickens or bought chickens, but they came down to, the lower dungeon where we were. There's like a courtyard of walkies. We're chasing these chickens all over, and there was a Moroccan guy in a single cell who was a chef, and he was my cook as well, because I was buying food, good food, and me and Bobby and Trunco, the guy in my cell, and this Moroccan guy who was a chef would cook it all for us, make us paella, all this, great food. They came down, they chased these chickens around drunk, they caught him and killed him, they let him out of his cell to cook for them. When he was finished, he just went back to his cell, and the guards were drunk, and one of them went upstairs. There's a little bed in a room off the office, and the other one goes home for the night and comes back the next day, and then there's these two guards. So there's only one guard, he's drunk, and the Moroccan guy came up to the window, heard us partying and everything, and said the guards didn't lock me up after they
left.
Yeah, after they left. They forgot to lock me up. So I looked out the window, there was this rope and an Ibiza basket that I used to get my visits upstairs in the guard's office, and I got visits every day from my American girlfriend, Melinda. She would come see me. I know that the rope was tied to a pillar upstairs, and the basket, and it was hanging halfway down, and I told him, get the broom and knock the rope down. If you go up there, the keys were just, I seen all this. The keys are right there. Let us out, and I'll give you 1,000 peseta, which isn't a lot of money, but it was to somebody that was completely broke. So he scurried up the rope. He got the keys. He came down. He unlocked our cell. Bobby went straight up and split. The Moroccan guy did the same thing. Trunco waited for me, and as I remember climbing up this rope, and I got my legs, somehow my legs went as faster than my hands, and I got myself parallel to the wall, and I just couldn't pull myself up anymore, and I let go, and I came all the way down, and my feet hit the cement cobblestones, and it made such a loud noise, but but the guard never woke up, and I went to do it the second time, and Trunco actually pulled me up, as I was climbing. I gave him money, and we ran out the door, and we all went in our own direction.
Wow, so you guys escaped.
Yeah, on my 21st birthday.
Oh my God.
I went to see this English girl that I knew that lived right there in the port, near where the jail was. And I hung out with her for the night, and, and she just told me, you're crazy. You gotta go turn yourself in. You can't get off this island. It's an island. There's nowhere to go. They're going to find you. The Guardia Civil is crazy. And I already knew they were crazy. They started, when they found the key to my house, they started, ¿Dónde está casa? Where is your house? And I just kept telling them, yo vagabundo, I'm a vagabond, yo no tengo casa aquí. This was for Barcelona, I had a house, because I couldn't tell them where my house was.
Because you had all the stuff there.
Yeah, and my friend's staying there. So they told me, take off your boots. And I thought, oh, they're finally going to search me, I took off the boots, and they started beating me on the bottom of my feet with their
batons.
trenches, their batons. And I was screaming, and they were hitting my ankles and my feet. And luckily, Melinda, the girl that was visiting me from California, that was visiting me all the time, brought me the drugs, she walked into the police station because she had heard I had been arrested. And she heard me screaming, and she, made a scene that she's going to go to the American embassy. You're killing him, you got to stop. So they stopped torturing me, and they just, sent me up to the prison on top of the hill, the dungeon. So anyway, this Michelle, this English girl, just convinced me there was no way to get off the island. You're going to get, caught and probably killed. I stayed up the night, getting high and having sex with her, and then in the morning, I just went walking back up to the to the jail, and the guards were going crazy. The director was there, both guards, and I just came walking in the front door. Anyway, everybody got caught. Moroccan guy got caught just hanging out in a bar with the money I gave him, drinking. The Spanish guy had family there. They caught him there, and my friend Bobby Gersnick, the Dutch junkie, he had cut his hair and dyed it and everything, but they identified him by a tattoo. He had stolen a motorbike, and they identified him by the tattoo. He was the last one to come in. He lasted like 10 days. As it was, those three all spoke Spanish, and they knew, I didn't speak hardly any Spanish at the time, and I was a loose cannon, I'd caused all sorts of trouble since I'd been there. There had never been an escape out of this dungeon in like the 300 years that it had been there or something. So they had the director from the inspector from the Department of Prisons was coming from Madrid to find out what happened. So they actually had a key maker come up and kind of like make a key, because they couldn't say that they got drunk and left this guy unlocked, and they couldn't tell the story, they'd all be in trouble. So they made this elaborate plan, that they made a key out of the bottom springs of one of the mattresses, one of the beds, and a rope that went up over the wall with a hook, and they did all this stuff and told those three guys that if you go along with it, we won't give you more time, we won't send you to trial for the escape and everything. But with me, they were just afraid of what I might say. They called somebody from the court, and they gave me what was called a liberty provisional, which is like your own recognizance. You could sign your way out. In fact, it's funny. They had a doctor come to inspect me before. For some reason, they looked at my calluses, and luckily I'd done a year in prison. I was lifting weights the whole time. I had a bunch of calluses, and that was like one of the things that showed you were a worker, one of the things that okayed them to give me this liberty provisional. They gave me one, and I was supposed to show up for court, and they let me out. And I met this French girl who became the mother of my son, Mary France. She was a forger. She was a couple years, it was my 21st birthday. I was 21. She was either 23 or 24. What happened is we hid out for like a month on the island, and I grew a beard, and she made me a carte d'identité français, a French identity card, which you could travel in Europe on in those days. And right before I was supposed to show up for court, we all went and got on the boat. You had to walk right through the LaGuardia Civil. They're standing there at the boat checking everybody, But she got a bunch of her French friends, and I had, a duffel bag over a shoulder hiding my face, and I'd grown a beard and cut my hair. And, we got on the boat. We went to Barcelona. In Barcelona, there was a bit of dilemma because we were going to France. In fact, I'd asked her, she'd been married to somebody in Marseille, and I asked her if she knew where I could buy smack, because that was like the center of... from Turkey, opium back in the day, and Union, of course, Marseille had all the chemists where they were making all the white dope at the time. So to pass the border, though, I could never do it with a French identity card. I didn't speak any French. So we went to the American embassy, and I lied and said that my passport was stolen in Valencia, and they go, well, why, do you have a police report? I said, no, because I know the embassy's here in Barcelona, so I just came up to Barcelona. He said, well, you're going to have to go get a police report, wasn't sure, if there was an APB. I mean, I escaped from a B, so I didn't show up to court. I found out when I got back to the United States, because I had a letter from the Spanish court, from the justice system, and from the American embassy, saying that they know I lied about saying my passport was stolen and that I'd left Spain illegally, and I've been tried in absentee, and if I ever went back to Spain, I'd have to do the 2 years in prison. Anyway, we had to get a police report. Mary France, and I was afraid to go make a police report because I was afraid that they might have my name. I don't know
if it crossed over.
If they crossed or whatnot. So what she did is she got a French friend of hers to go into the police department and make a report that his passport was still in Valencia and everything. So we would copy it word for word. She was a forger. She was a real good forger. Guy went and got one, and we had to make an exact copy of this paper, but there was a stamp on it. And she tried. She couldn't copy the stamp. So she asked him, where was the stamp? Oh, it's on the police chief's desk. It's just sitting there. And they
Oh, my God.
So wait. So she says, come on, come with me. So we walked into the police station, and she asked to see the chief, and she was all upset. And we walked in there, and she said, somebody touched me on the street. I'm a French citizen. Somebody touched me. This is incredible. I can't believe this happened in your country. And then all of a sudden she spins around, winks at me, spins around, and falls on the ground. And she had told me, just say agua when
you got it.
When I do my thing. So I yelled agua. The chief ran out. She sat up, grabbed the stamp put it in her bra, and laid back down, Yeah, so we forged the paper, went to the American embassy, and I got
And it worked. Oh,
it
my
worked.
God.
I got a passport, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. We went into a typewriter shop, and she typed it all up, copying it, and then she had the stamp, so she was able to do that and forge his signature with no problem. So, yeah. I mean, both found out, the embassy and the Spanish government, that it had happened, but whatever. I was out of Spain, and believe it or not, luckily when I went back, it's funny, every night all the prisoners in this little dungeon would walk around the circle after eating, and they would all be, chanting, Franco morta amnestia, Franco morta amnestia. Franco was the dictator at the time. But if he died, there would be a big amnesty. So they were all begging for, for him to die so they would get amnestied out of jail. And it's kind of crazy how it works. I remember I'd come back to the States on a drug run and reading about Franco finally died. And I did the math, and it was like, a week after my 2 years would have been up.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so I would have been like walking in circles for 2 years, going Franco morta amnestia, and then finally, after I got out a week later, he would have died. All the papers work was destroyed after that. I found out through a lawyer. I ended up going back to Spain because I married a French actress later on in my life, and her family had a summer home in Spain. Her mom was from Andalusia. We actually started building a house in the south of Spain with some land they had given her. At the time I was just, hell-bent on doing what I did. The people that lived in my house when I got arrested, the ones that, I took that beating for, not to rat it out, they had all gone, and I knew it, to Frankfurt, Germany, because one of the girls, Anushka, this Dutch girl, always talked about, dealing drugs to GIs and how great Frankfurt was and everything. So I knew that's where they would have all gone. I went with her. I went to Marseille. We bought a bunch of dope and heroin in the Arabic Quarter, which was an experience in itself. Then we went to her mom's in Paris. She had a daughter that she had left with her mom from previous time. She had gone to India. She had a daughter with this Australian guy. She had left the daughter there, and we went there. But I was just shooting up and nodding out the whole time, and the mom told her she could stay, but your boyfriend's got to go. All he does is sleep all the time. And anyway, we made auto stop, hitchhiking to Frankfurt. I found the people that were living in my house that had stolen, they got like a couple kilos of heroin, a couple hundred acid trips and everything. They were dealing to GIs. And
what are GIs?
Military, American military.
Okay.
Yeah. There was big military bases at the time in Germany. I think there still is, probably. They made really good clients. In fact, they became very good clients of me in later years. I actually got arrested in Germany and did 7 months I was bringing heroin from New Delhi. It's called Delhi Smack, and selling it to the GIs in Firth, which was an army base. oddly enough, what happened is all these GIs got strung out in Vietnam, and then they had this drug amnesty that if you turned yourself in, they would send you to Germany and detox you and at the hospital there, and they could finish their term there. And anyway, I found that they were real ready customers to buy drugs. I ended up doing some runs there and got arrested there finally, which was kind of like the story of my life. I got arrested in almost every country I went to because I thought, I had the right to put anything I want in my system, and buying and selling drugs was the only way that I could get high the way I thought I had to get high. It was all part of the lifestyle that had started when I ran away to Hollywood, and I just kept getting in trouble from here to there. I did that 7 months in Germany. I got arrested in Kabul by Interpol. Was working with the Afghan police because all the hash was coming out of Afghanistan going to Europe. And they went around to every hotel, and anybody with more than just personal stash got arrested. And, of course, I had a couple kilos, and I got deported by the Afghan police and Interpol out of Afghanistan. I got arrested in New Delhi and did I only did 6 weeks in Afghanistan and deported. I got arrested in New Delhi. It's funny, when my then, pregnant girlfriend, because she got pregnant when we were hiding out in Ibiza, waiting to get out of town, we came back to the States. We got a bunch of, a couple kilos of hash from these people in Germany that owed me. I had to take a fishing knife, this paring knife, big hook knife, to this guy's neck to convince them, but I ended up getting enough money for our plane tickets and a couple kilos of hash. And then we went back to the States.
With the kilos of hash?
Yeah.
How would you guys smuggle them in?
Wrapped it in her body, made her look more pregnant than she actually was.
Yeah.
It's funny. We landed in Chicago on the way to Los Angeles. Of course, I had long hair and I was a freak. She dressed conservative. So we went through customs separately. I see her, walking off with one of the customs guys, and I thought she had got busted. I had gone through, and I was freaking out, and I didn't know whether to stay here or go back to Los Angeles on my plane, and I really thought she had got busted. And finally, they paged my name, and they said, your fiance is waiting for you on the plane. And I jumped on the plane right before it left, and she was laughing. She had played the poor little French girl that didn't understand English and didn't know where, the guy was just escorting her to the plane to show her where the plane was, But she had wrapped her body, she was pregnant. But we found out actually at the American Embassy in Frankfurt when we went there that she was, I think we had to get her a visa to come in. But there was a doctor's, and she went and saw the doctor in the embassy, and she came out and she said, I knew it. I feel the same way when I was pregnant with my daughter. I'm pregnant, So we went back to the States. Took me no time at all to get arrested again. This time I convinced the narcs that I would turn informant, that I told them, my girlfriend's out there. She's pregnant. We're going to have a kid. I don't care about all my old friends. And because they said to me that the narcs knew me really well in where I lived in California, in the San Gabriel Valley. They said, you'd always spit in our face when we asked you to, inform. What made you change your mind? And I just, being a good bullshit. See, I'd called her up on my one phone call, and she said, Mark, you got to get out of there. I'm pregnant with your baby. Tell them anything that they want to know, but you got to get out there. So I had asked to talk to these two narcotics guys that arrested me before, and I just convinced them that all I cared about was the wife and baby, and I would rat all these guys out, and they let me out, I said, it's going to take me a few days. I got to call people's parents, find out where they're living. And so what happened is when I got busted, they let me out to become an informant. They said, but if you leave, we don't care where you go in the world, we're going to find you, And I said, yeah, okay. And when I got out, she said, Mark, listen, I'm going to take you to a place where you're never going to have to worry about getting your drugs, and you're never going to have to worry about going to jail. We're going to India. We called ourselves freaks at the time, but there was a whole...
Smugglers and drug addicts.
Yeah. where my son was born in Goa. It's a beach colony below Bombay. Few hundred of us, a few thousand, I don't even know how many. You could rent a beach house. The house my son was born in was cost like, $10 a month for this 3-bedroom tile roof house. I got pictures of it in my phone. And would run around the beach, go to full moon parties, be naked or half naked everywhere, and it was a scene. And she said, "I'm going to take you someplace where you're never going to have trouble getting your drugs." And it was true. We went overland in Afghanistan. I mean, you could buy heroin and cocaine out of the pharmacy in Kabul.
Really?
Yeah.
You can buy heroin at the pharmacy?
Yeah. It was
like in bricks or like
no. It was
20-gram
bottles of Burroughs and Wellcome pharmaceutical heroin.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the cocaine was Germany, Merck from World War II. I mean, the dates on it was like 1943 and stuff.
Wow.
Really pure bottles of cocaine as well, all pharmaceutical. And, and hash was next to nothing. It was cheaper to buy an ounce of hash than a pack of American cigarettes in Kabul at the time.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, my life went pretty much on like that, getting into dealing, smuggling, getting high. I was strung out to the tits over there because it was so easy to get pure drugs. You could get it right out of the pharmacy. And finally, when my son was like 4.5 years old, I got into a big fight with my ex-wife, the French girl at the time. And I grabbed the kid in the middle of the night and ran down the beach. And because she had an Italian boyfriend, they came to your wife, your children, they come with me because you're a junkie and and I just went crazy. We were living at that time just in a bamboo hut, on the beach. And I got in a fight and knocked the whole hut down. And I was actually reaching for my survival knife that I kept under my pillow, and I grabbed my son's leg, and I realized she was trying to take the kid. So, I wrapped him up in a fur jacket we had bought in Kashmir and went running down the beach with him, That year when I called my parents, I'd always call them collect on my birthday, let them know I was still alive.
Yeah.
And they said, "How are Mary France and the children?" Because we had got her daughter, we kidnapped her daughter out of an orphanage when her mom had died, and the kid was in an orphanage. And when I got out of jail that time in Germany after doing 7 months for selling drugs to GIs, we had all these stories, but thank God I can remember it all.
Yeah.
She was we were known as the Bonnie and Clyde of the Far East, And I just, went doing crazy shit. And anyway, I called my parents and they said, how's Mary France and the children? And she had the daughter, but I took the son, I said, well, me and Raven are fine, but, we broke up. And she says, you can't take care of a kid by yourself. You're a junkie. Let us take him. So I said I'd think about it, and next thing I knew, they were in Bombay, and they took my son back to America, which I thought was a good idea because he was like 4.5 years old, and he'd been around this drug scene and all the craziness all this time, and I figured if he grew up in the States, he'd at least have a chance to choose if he wanted to go into that life or not, So I came back to the States, a month or so after they took him. I brought like 4 ounces. I'd gone to Bangkok on a false Canadian passport because the American embassy didn't want to give me a passport because they knew what I had done before. They just wanted to give me a temporary one to fly back to the States. So
it's so crazy. It seems like for you, like making fake passports is like stealing someone's Netflix account or something. Like it's so easy.
Right. Well, this was another French girl, Francois, that made it for me. The French women, for whatever reason, were great forgers.
Good forgers, yeah.
And I'd gone over to Bangkok and I bought like 4 ounces of heroin from my own stash because if I was going to come back to the States, I had to have drugs. And when I got here, I found that those ounces that were $200 an ounce in Bangkok were $5,000 an ounce here.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I ended up selling most of what I brought back instead of using it prolonged. And and started doing runs back and forth from California to Bangkok and back.
How would you ship it back?
I would get a woman to either
Mule
go
it?
with me.
Mm-hmm.
No, to carry it.
Yeah.
It was a well-known, in my smuggling thing, there was something called a Sony 120 stereo. It was a little portable cassette player with wires and 2 speakers, and it all fed into like a plastic, like an attache case or a guitar case or something. And you could undo the screws and the speakers. You'd wrap the dope, you'd pressure wrap it into rubbers, non-lubricated rubbers, and you'd wrap it tight, and you could fit, a couple of kilos around the speaker. What we would do is, we'd have the one Sony that we used on the first trip, and would buy the drugs in Bangkok, put them in that Sony, take them to Japan. I'd have the runners, the women, meet me in Japan. Japan wasn't known for drugs.
Yeah, so it wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
But if you get caught doing with the drugs in Japan, it's a big thing, right?
Probably, but they would never search a foreigner
In Japan?
disrespectful. At the time we didn't worry about that. But what the really good part of the game is because everybody at the time was buying cameras and stereos and
Electronics,
stuff.
yeah.
Electronics in Japan. They had a duty-free shop at the airport, but they also had a duty-free shop, electrical shop in all the big hotels. So I'd stay at the Hilton, wherever it was in Tokyo. The morning we were leaving, I would go down, I'd buy the Sony 120 stereo, come up, carefully take off, there was Sony tape that went around it and everything, undo everything perfectly, fill the new one completely full of drugs, close it all up, the box, the ribbons that went around the whole thing, just perfectly put it back together, and would have the girl carry it through customs, and I would have, after the first trip or so, the first one I just used a girl that I had met in Bangkok, a Canadian girl. But after that, I would have girls come to Japan. So in their passport, they had no stamps for Bangkok or anywhere near the Golden Triangle. They would have a receipt that they had bought the stereo system
In
at
Japan.
duty-free, which to anybody that didn't actually know Japan would think duty-free meant the airport, But it wasn't. Would go down in the hotel, get a duty-free stamp and everything that you could buy electronics like that. And then, when you come into the States, I had the girls say that their boyfriends are in the military, at a Navy base in Japan, and they went over on spring break or whatever the holiday was to spend 10 days with their fiancés, and I mean, it was just perfect. In fact, I think that year we did about 9 runs. I would have plenty of drugs to use and plenty of drugs to sell, and I had money like I didn't even know what to do with it. But like what always happens in that game, I was only selling to a couple of people. One of them sold to some guys I knew him from India because they had done a hash oil run over there. He evidently, the guy that I was selling to, told him it was all coming through me and everything. And they got busted, of course, doing hash oil scam and gave me up. And on my, 9th or 7th trip that year, I don't remember how many, it was a bunch, the DEA, followed me over, checked into the Dusatani Hotel, the floor above me, wired our room so they knew everything that was going on. And the day that we were going to score to pick up, because we had to wait for Mama-san to get back from the Malaysian border with the dope, my connection there. And I didn't know I was paying like $2,000 for 3 tungs. It's like 40 ounces, a little bit over a kilo. But I was paying like $5,000 for it after I got locked up there and everything. I found out I could have gone to Chiang Mai and bought it for $2,000 a kilo, but it didn't matter because I'd buy the whole thing for $5,000. I'd get 40 ounces. I'd bring it back to the States. 1 ounce was $5,000, my money back, The second ounce was $5,000 that I was paying the runner, and the rest was all profit. So I was high rolling at a Lincoln Continental and and a Corvette Stingray, a 65 Stingray, and a couple of Harleys. And anyway, the DEA followed me over there. They had our rooms bugged. And it's funny, the morning we got arrested, or the night we got arrested, in the morning, the Bangkok Post came with our room service in the morning, and it showed these two Italians that, believe it or not, later became my friends in jail, that got arrested for smuggling heroin inside of Buddhas and got sentenced to like 25 years. Because up until then, everybody had told me you could just pay off the police if you got caught. There's no big deal, Bangkok.
In Bangkok.
Yeah. But what happened, that was just at the time that all the GIs were coming out of Vietnam.
They're
and
cracking down.
Yeah, and they were cracking down on the Golden Triangle. And actually the DEA had taken a bunch of Thai DEA through the San Francisco school. And so they had these guys at crime suppression. The guy that actually busted me, this Captain Veyrat, he was Thai DEA crime suppression. When we got that newspaper in the morning and saw that, I realized they were giving out serious time for this. This guy's got 25 years. So I told my friend Jay, who was with me, he was going to carry it to Japan where the girl was meeting us, because I didn't want to carry anything by this time. I had a lot of money and I could buy people to do things. I said, you know what, we got to get more slick than, what we're going to do. We'll pick up the dope, we'll put it in the stereo, the one stereo system, which is just the one we took it to Japan on. And we would leave it in the hotel in the left luggage and tell them that we were just going to Pattaya Beach for the weekend and we're coming back, or a week and come back. And then, I'd return by myself. So if they did know something, they'd think that I had the drugs, and if I get through with no problem to Japan and to the States, I'll call you and tell you it's fine. But, so the cops heard us talking about all this.
Yes, they knew.
Because when they busted us, my friend said, you knew what we were doing. Why didn't you wait till we got to the States to catch us? And he said, you know what? Number one, when you got here, you would have just got some highfalutin lawyers, made bail with the money you're making, and probably beat the case on some technicality. Over here, you have one chance, and that's talk to this guy, Captain Veyrat, because if you don't give him information, you're going away for a long, long time, What happened, they said you guys were getting too slick, and we were afraid we might lose the
case.
Yeah, the case, What happened is we didn't know it, but they were there. We went to the Indra Shopping Center, which had a movie house and a shopping center. And we were looking for Mama San's daughters. They were supposed to deliver us the drugs there. And we didn't see them at first. So we went into a clothing store and we were looking at some shirts and stuff. And then all of a sudden I saw the girls. So I went over and I grabbed Jay and I said, listen, it's on, it's happening. He said, wait, I'm buying these shirts. I said, we'll come back for them. It's on, let's go. So we went up the stairs and they followed us. And there was a blind spot where, the thing... So we took the bags from them and came back downstairs. And I guess the cops realized we didn't have these bags before. And now we have these shopping bags. And I just said, all right, let's go get the shirts now. He says, man, I said, who cares? But I was standing there and buying a couple shirts and this.
How many kilos of heroin was it?
2 kilos.
2 kilos. Okay.
Yeah. Like 80 ounces, a little over 2 kilos.
Yeah.
This cop came up in a safari suit, it was plain clothes. And he said, my name is Captain Veyrat. You come with me. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a tourist, man. What? Stop hassling me. I'm buying these shirts. Go away, And then he opened up his little jacket and I saw the gun and the badge and everything. And I freaked out. I pushed him and took off running. But I didn't know that, they were everywhere watching us. I got like 20 or 30 feet and got tackled. And then he came up and he was pissed off because I had pushed him. He split my head open with his handcuffs. And they handcuffed me and they had the drugs. I had the drugs with me. And then they went back in. And my friend Jay hadn't even noticed. He was at a different counter that any of this went on. They just went up and put the cuffs on him. And that was like the beginning of the end for me, and the fact that...
How old were you?
27 years old.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In Bangkok or in Thailand, if you plead not guilty, you get double the time.
Huh.
So, for the first time in my life, I'd always had, I
Not guilty.
ended up
Yeah.
pleading guilty, getting 20 years, cut in half to 10 for pleading guilty, and got sent to jail by the old airport, Don Mueang Airport at Klong Prem Ladiao. Klong Prem means prison, Ladiao.
What was the prison like?
There was a foreign section there where we had like 50, 60, from everywhere, from Hong Kong, from all the European countries, from Israel. There was, the conditions were bad, but it was the middle of the Golden Triangle. It was easier for me to get pure heroin than food. I say that because I was a dealer in the foreign section, and
even in prison.
Yeah, and I would, that wife, Mary France, the one I had the son with in Goa.
You're not even thinking about getting clean.
No, not for a minute. I didn't think it was possible.
Yeah.
I believed the lie. Once an addict, always an addict. I shot dope the whole time I was in prison for 6 years. I did it on the nod, and when it wasn't working because I had such a tolerance, I would eat, a handful of Valium, a couple Royal Hypnol, and then by the time I would find a vein, because all my veins were collapsed and shoot up, I'd nod out for a couple hours and then come out of it and do the whole thing all over again, That wife, by then we were married. We came back to the States that time when my son was a couple years old, and we ended up getting married in Vegas.
After the 6-year bid?
No, before it.
Before it, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, she came to Thailand and she was visiting me, and I had made a deal with the building chief in the foreign section. The commander of the prison wanted everybody to beautify their section with flowers and, do all these like remodeling. Mm-hmm. And every other section had work that they did. There was an auto shop, there was a woodworking, Chiang Mai was a woodworking shop. Every section had things that they did to make money. But in our section, they could never get us to work. They tried to get us to sew soccer balls one time. That didn't work. They couldn't get the foreigners to work. Mm-hmm. So what he started doing, because he had to get money for the commander to beautify the section, was he started arresting everybody, busting the poker game. There was a bunch of GIs and Americans that ran a poker game. They busted Eddie, extorted them. They would bust people for drugs and extort them. And he busted me. Normally half the guards are selling you drugs, Mm-hmm. And he busted me, and I went up to the dark room above his office, and I asked the guards, I want to talk to Wana Vichit. Wana means chief, Vichit. He took me downstairs, and I said, listen, he spoke English, you're asking for big, big trouble. Somebody's going to tell the American embassy that you're extorting money from us, and you're going to end up in big, big scandal. I said, you want money for the section? I'll tell you what, my wife is here. In the beginning, she wasn't there. I said, if you let me sell drugs, I'll give you the profits. All I care about is getting high and eating good, the rest, the money, the profits you can have to beautify the section. So I became his official dealer. Mm-hmm. In fact, I remember one time, because anything that I was due, if the guards would try to hassle me about it, I'd tell them, Wana Vichit told me that it was okay, Yeah. One time he brought me to his office screaming at me, my guards more afraid of you than they are of me, But, what happened, it's funny, he had never been scored drugs or knew anything about them, And in the beginning, he just went over to Chiang Mai, the woodworking shop, where it was a big drug haven, and brought drugs for inside the jail prices and brought them to me. Mm-hmm. And I said, this is good, but it's hard to make any real money because everything has a price here. You got to buy on the outside, And
this is the commander?
The commander of this is the chief of the foreign section.
Chief of the foreign section.
Dendon Patet, the Den of Foreign Nations is what it was. That's what Dendon Patet means. Anyway, he went out with one of the guards from Building 4 that knew where to buy drugs, and I gave him the money, And he came back the next day, and it was funny because, he was such a lame, and I just had to laugh at it. He said, I went within the Klung Toy, which is a real bad part of Bangkok, where the drugs are. And the guy who sell the drug, he's afraid to meet me because I'm
Police.
Yeah, he thinks I'm police. So he want me give my friend the money, and my friend take for me. But I don't trust them. I think maybe they steal the money, so I don't give him your money. So he came back empty-handed.
Yeah.
So just then, my wife, Mary France, shows up to visit me with her daughter and this French girl named Claire. And we work out a deal where, I take everybody's money. I gave her the money. She went up to Chiang Mai where she could buy, it was really cheap in Chiang Mai. And she came back and I'd tell her to keep half the money. So she was paying her rent, her food, her complete lifestyle there. The guard was getting, money from me, so the chief, so he could make flowers and beautify the whole section in the foreign section. And I had all the drugs I wanted, and I could trade. The Italians were getting all these care packages. I'd trade them dope for food. I'd have money so I could send the guards out to get filet mignon and whatever I wanted. So, for a good year and a half that went on, but then too many people knew she was doing it and everything. I had to tell her, you got to leave. You're going to get arrested, and too many people in here know what we're doing. Yeah. So anyway, while I was in there, and I was in there from 1976 to 1982, God was working in my life, and I just didn't know it at the time. What happened is my mom had written a book. She had interviewed me when I came back to the States and everything, how my son was born, about the escape from Ibiza, all this stuff. And she had wrote like her version of everything and how she got my grandson, how good he was doing, and she published articles in Red Circle or Red Book and Circle Magazine, Family Circle, whatever it was. And this girl in recovery out in California got in touch with my mom, wrote her a letter that, the best thing that could have happened for your grandson, because they got him when I went to jail, and they raised him, and he was in Little League and Hebrew school. And
living a normal life.
Yeah, and, in soccer and baseball, and my dad was the coach. They had sold their business in California. My dad sold his business, and they moved to Florida so she could be close to her mother, who lived in Deerfield. And this girl wrote my mom all about recovery and the program, and it's funny. I remember getting letters sitting in the jail. I'd rip open a letter, hoping there was a check in there or some money in there. And it would just be, you got to get out and go to these meetings when you get out, And I would wad it up, and throw it in the corner and think, yeah, those people in the meetings are a bunch of lames. They maybe tried drugs once, shot up one time, and got scared to turn out like me. So they started going to these meetings. But nobody like me ever got clean, because I believed the lie, once an addict, always an addict. I thought I was going to die like Lenny Bruce, sitting on a toilet with a needle in my arm, And when I got out finally, there was an amnesty in 1982. The Crown Prince had a son who was an heir to the crown. And the Crown Prince, I think, is the king of Thailand now. But anyway, when he had a male heir to the throne, they had an amnesty, and I got out in 6 years instead of doing 10. And I came back to the States. I went to La Jolla, where my brother, who had become a lawyer, he had a place right on the ocean, and I had bought a couple hundred methadone tablets when I knew I was coming back to the States, and I figured the DEA would be following me and watching me, and I had to be cool for a little while. I bought a couple hundred methadone tablets, and I started detoxing myself at my brother's place in La Jolla, taking like 25 milligram methadone tablets the first day, and then 18, and, going down like that. And my brother brought me to his doctor, who was a friend, and he wrote me a big prescription for Valium, and said, take one every 4 hours, and being a good addict, I was taking 4 every 1 hour, I flew back. I remember it was July 4th from La Jolla, San Diego, because we landed, the plane, I think, stopped in Chicago or Detroit on the Great Lakes, and all these fireworks were going off. And I came to Fort Lauderdale. When I got to my mom's condo, she had a little blackboard in her kitchen, that she would write things to remember on. And she had called the hotline, had this girl who worked the hotline, had her number. And when I walked in, my mom said, "You got to call this girl and go to these meetings." And I laughed at her. I said, "What, are you crazy? I haven't shot dope in 2 weeks. I don't need that shit." Meanwhile, I was eating Valium like they were candy. Even though I had never really drank alcohol, my whole addiction, when I was 13, I got drunk on Manischewitz wine at a Passover thing at my aunt's and puked on her carpet, and it kind of cured me of my alcoholism for the next 30 years or so. Here I was, 33 years old, and on the plane, I saw these little bottles of, and I
started drinking.
Yeah, I thought, well, at least it's legal, sociably acceptable, and I won't get thrown back in prison for that, It's funny, the whole time I was in jail, I never thought, because I didn't know it was possible to stop, and I never thought for a minute of getting out of the life. I had plans like, I would go up to the Himalayas, and I'd send my runners with the drugs, and they could send me back the money, and I'd have a Harley and a Mercedes and a Jeep in Manali or Kulu Valley in the Himalayas where the DEA couldn't find me, and I never for a minute thought about getting out of that life. I didn't know it was possible. What happened, I went on for like a month. I didn't know how to live without anything, so I would get up in the morning, I would drink out of my parents' bar. If I had to go down to get a pack of cigarettes, I would have to have a big glass of whiskey or whatever first, I would go out I'd borrow my dad's car and go out to bars at night, and now these people were laughing and having fun, and I'd just sit there at the bar drinking and wondering, why the fuck, how the fuck do you even get to know anybody? I realized after I got clean that if you hadn't either been to prison, traveled in Southeast Asia, or shot heroin, we had nothing to talk about anyway. But, and I met this crazy guy who was also an ex-addict, and he'd become an alcoholic, covered in tattoos, kind of like I am today, And we ended up going out. This was in Fort Lauderdale where my parents were, and there was a happy hour at one of the clubs on the beach, and all you could drink for whatever it was. And we were yelling because they weren't, serving us the vodka that we wanted quick enough, and we made a scene, and they sent the bouncers over, and we ended up getting in a fight and getting all banged up, and the cops got caught on us and spent the night in jail, signed our way out. I think I didn't even have ID. I gave them a false name. But I went walking into my mom's condo just after staying there for a month in my son's room, doing what I was doing. And we came walking in all bruised and bloody. And, we had stopped on the way from the jail to get a fifth of vodka. And my mom took one look at us, it was early in the morning. And she said, "Your friend's got to go. He got to get out of here, So he left, and my mom said, "And you should go with him. I can't see you like this anymore." And I said, "You know what? I can't see myself like this anymore either. I hated alcohol. I hated the effect. I hated the taste, but I didn't know how to live without anything." So he said, "Why don't you call this woman from the program?" And I said, "I'll try anything once." So I called her up, and to my surprise, she wasn't a lame. She, yeah. In fact, it's funny, her fiance became my first sponsor, Charles K. He was like 5 years clean at the time, had a zigzag tattooed on his arm. He was a biker. He was an ex-convict. He had been in Vietnam, so he knew about the white dope and everything. He was everything I needed in a clean person to stay clean myself. In fact, I lived for the first so many months just on whatever he was sharing at meetings that night, But she asked me, "Do you want to go to a meeting?" And I said, "Well, I'll try anything once." That was my philosophy when I was out there using, And I went to a meeting, and I guess I knew something was going on at that very first meeting. People weren't a bunch of lames. They didn't read about addiction in psychology 1A class at the university. They'd been there. They did that. I could relate. There was something going on. I realized today that I didn't know what it was back then. I know today, for this addict, anytime two or more of us get together to help each other stay clean, this power shows up, and it was the power I was feeling. And, people were laughing and smiling and having fun. And that, I guess, was important to me because I didn't want to get clean to get miserable. I'd rather be out there shooting dope miserable, you know. There was something going on at those meetings, and people would pick me up every night. And there was, it's funny, I'd spent that month drinking and eating Valium. There was a meeting within almost walking distance. They lived in the Gulf Ocean Mile, and there was Mel's Church. There was a couple of meetings a week, and there was a meeting within a couple miles of that every night of the week. But it just took me like a month of being miserable, I guess, to become ready and willing, and then when I met all the people and realized that it was possible to get clean, I remember the girl that when she brought me home, she said, "What did you think?" I said, "Well, it's pretty cool, but I probably shot more dope than everybody in the meeting together," which is probably even the truth, you know. But the truth of the matter was, when I found out I didn't have to use it, was a relief. It was really a relief to find out that people could get clean and stay clean.
And have fun and smile. And
the hard part was changing my lifestyle, because smuggling and dealing and living that lifestyle had been my whole life for a couple of decades now, I'd started doing drugs when I was like 16 years old, and I was 33 years old at the time, in 82 when I found recovery. And I think just going to meetings, for some reason, I realized in that very early in recovery that, I was a know-it-all. And if I didn't know it, I'd convince you I knew it anyway, But I realized that everybody in these rooms knew something that I knew nothing about, And the only way I was going to find out was to find out and listen and pay attention. And there was no way I was going to bullshit people about recovery, So I just started going to meetings, and the people that I looked up to, were living by these spiritual principles of honesty and integrity, and they just became just like, I guess, when I was a teenager and found the druggies on the strip, I found out what was going on, and I just did that, at meetings, and I went to meetings, and then there was dances, and then somebody paid my ticket to go to Milwaukee for World Convention, the 11th.
How did you get off the drugs? You just detox yourself?
I detoxed myself with
methadone and Valium?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And, I just took like 10 milligrams less every day, until the 200 were gone. It's funny, I didn't even know that you could be addicted to Valium, because I swear, in prison in Thailand, I used to eat 10, 20 of them at a time, and then a couple Royal Hypnols on top of that, and then look for a vein. I mean, how I lived through the abuse and the tolerance that I had in those days, is beyond amazing, I didn't sleep well for the first month or so. I remember telling people, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm hanging in there, but I can't sleep." And they tell me, addicts don't die of lack of sleep. They die of overdoses.
Told me. Oh my God. Yeah.
And I'd want to grab them and choke them, And I remember they told me, it's going to get better and when, and then they told me that someday I'd be grateful for my low bottom, and I just done 6 years of my life in Thai prison. And again, I wanted to grab them by the neck, but all those things came to pass. I don't know whether it was at a month or 6 weeks clean or whatever, but all of a sudden, instead of finally falling asleep for a couple hours at 4 or 5 in the morning, and waking up feeling horrible, I started sleeping, and just little by slowly, I started feeling better. And then I fell into the business that I was doing, for most of my adult life in recovery. Real funny story. I'm in Geneva at a watch auction.
Yeah, so you eventually started doing watches and selling
I
watches?
started doing watches, started making money,
Mm-hmm.
started traveling around for business. I got by in a half a dozen languages, so going to Germany where I'd done 7 Monats Gefängnis in Deutschland, the 7 months jail in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
I could speak a little and French. I ended up married to 2 different French women, but I could
Yeah.
get by in French and Spanish, even though I was only like 6 weeks in in jail in Spain. It wasn't my strongest language, but I could get by
Yeah.
internationally and with international people. Pretty soon, I was wearing Armani suits, and because I was selling a lot of watches in Milano and in Italy, and all these fashion going on and
How
making money.
That's interesting to me because like I was so scared to travel when I first got clean. You know, you didn't have like a fear of being away or like traveling at all.
No, because I'd spent like 13 years traveling
It's just normal to you.
before I came home in '82.
Mm-hmm.
So it
And
really,
you would hit meetings in other countries still?
I still do
Okay.
that. In fact, I spoke at the first convention they had. I was the opening speaker in Bangkok, Thailand.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Talking about coming around full circle. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. And I said it's only just that you asked me to speak at your first convention because I kind of like hit my bottom a few miles from here
Wow.
and Lardioux prison, and it was a 6-year bottom. I went out to dinner afterwards. There was a famous guitar player, Jimmy P, I'll say.
Yeah, I know who it is.
Yeah, and we went out to dinner after, I spoke and everything. You know what? It's just, it's incredible. I travel a lot of my active addiction. I've got to travel a lot of my recovery. I've been to meetings at the Monkey Temple outside of Kathmandu and Swayambhu, where, I
Wow.
used to go to full moon parties and trip and get all crazy in Nepal. I know people from meetings all around the world because my watch business took me. It was a very international business.
Mm-hmm.
As I was going to say, I'm at this auction. I'm probably 4 or 5 years clean at the time, maybe a little more. And I'm got on my suit, Armani suit and tie, and I'm there with my paddle. And who comes walking in and sits kitty cornered from me with his 2 bodyguards, but I could reach over and touch him?
Mm-hmm.
The Crown Prince of Thailand.
Oh my God.
The same one who I was released as an amnesty for him having a son. And, I like to say we both had our paddles. We were betting against each other, but that's bullshit. He was buying clocks, and I was interested in wristwatches.
Okay.
But I sat there in amazement thinking if I want to, I can just reach over and tap him on the shoulder and talk to him in his own language even.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you go from being one of the biggest scumbags in his whole country, locked up, sleeping on floors with red rice and fish head soup as dinner from if you didn't have money to buy food from outside? How do you go from that to sitting with him, hobnobbing with him at an auction,
Buying watches.
yeah, buying watches, so it was a
Yeah.
pretty amazing feeling. And just little by slowly, I learned the spiritual lessons that the people that came before me taught me about honesty and integrity and doing the right thing, and I worked that into my business life, and because of that I was very successful. I had quite a great run on it. My store's closed now. I'm in a big legal battle with my ex-business partner who was an investor who'd emptied out the showcases, and there's a $2 million lawsuit. It's been going on for like 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. Things are very tight, but I don't sit there and go, oh, shit, I used to have Maseratis and Porsches and turbo Porsche and all this high rolling stuff that I used to have. I go down to the gym. I'm trying to stay healthy, and I go down in the middle of the night and do like an hour on the machines and weights and then an hour on the stationary bike. And I had sold my condo that was in Oceania, right on the beach when all this happened. And luckily I had a chunk of money, so I bought a 1-bedroom on the bay in San Souci. There's a gym there looking out over the bay and the lights and the moon and the stars, and I talk to God, and I just stay in gratitude, I thank him for, help me stay clean one more day, grant me the wisdom to do your will, help me in my recovery, help me to remain, honest and kind and generous with my fellow human beings. I thank him for everything, the dog I have that Chinese crested,
The cat.
who goes with me and sits next to the bicycle while I ride the bike, and I thank him for the apartment, this beautiful gym overlooking the ocean, and for the car that gets me around, for some money in the bank, for some food in the refrigerator, and I thank him, I tell him, thank you for everything you've given me, but most of all, thank you for everything you've taken away. And, he took away, nobody's kicked in my door in the middle of the night and dragged me off in handcuffs, the only jails and prisons I've been to is to go in and tell my story and help other people find recovery, and it's been a long, long time. I haven't had to have my fat little fist around the butt of a gun trying to protect some bullshit street image that I thought I had, because all the crazy stuff that I went through when I was out there using on a daily basis, that's all been removed. And I just stay in gratitude, and even though things, aren't as nice as they used to be, I know that, this case would have been finished if it wasn't for COVID, They postponed everything. There's supposed to be a new trial in November, and hopefully that'll happen if these new cases don't mess everything up again and go back to the way it was during the lockdowns. But I'm just grateful to be alive. I'm 72 years old.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You look great for 72.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the secret? It's the heroin, right?
You know what? I always thought that, in fact, William Burroughs, who wrote Junkie, had a theory that addicts, they stay young because they don't have the stress and they don't feel anything, and it may be the truth. I mean, for sure, if I hadn't found recovery, I would have been
dead. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I wasn't dead, I'd probably be in some third world country doing 10 years or 20 years of the big bitch, locked up for life in one of those countries, because that's the way it was going, before I got clean.
How proud were your parents of you when you got clean?
Very, I mean, I was there for my son's bar mitzvah, weddings. They got a couple of them. My track record, I've been married 4 times, I've been divorced 4 times and married 3 times in recovery. Still trying to figure out the common denominator.
Yeah. Who knows?
It's what goes wrong in all these relationships. But now I'm just grateful for what I have and the life I have today, and I stay in gratitude.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How long you been clean now?
Well, I got clean in 1982. Like 10 years ago, I went in for hip replacement. And when I got out, I came off of the pain meds like I was supposed to. But I had been taking Ambien. I've been traveling to shows in Hong Kong every month, and it's a crazy flight. And you could buy Ambien just over the counter in Hong Kong. You didn't even need a prescription. And I found myself possibly, it was the pain from the operation and everything. Possibly it was this business partner that I didn't know how to deal with. That was making, my work life, whatever it was, I found myself taking 8 or 10 of them a day and just wanting to sleep. And even though, they don't get you high, they don't, it's not like heroin, or it's not that I actually felt things. I would just fall asleep, but I realized that I was escaping life. So I picked up a white chip and started counting time again, and in August,
Awesome.
This is August 20th, it'll be like 10 years again.
Okay, awesome, man.
But I went out with over 20,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on celebrating 10. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Over the years, I always try to ask this question because I think it's like something everyone asks is like, what do you see when you see someone that like cannot stay clean? Like, what do you see is like the difference between people that stay clean and people that don't?
That's a good question. I mean, For me, recovery is a gift from God, you know. I couldn't explain it any other way. It either happens or it doesn't happen, you know. For sure, it comes with making a decision, you know. A lot of people. I remember one time, you know, I stopped smoking in '95, and I remember I was chairing a meeting one time years ago at the old warehouse, the original warehouse, and I was chairing the lunch meeting, and you know, I shared about how I was going through a divorce, how, you know, normally when something like this would happen, I'd have fallen apart. And instead, I was doing everything right. I was eating, I was going to the gym, I was staying healthy, I was doing all these positive things, I was in therapy. And, you know, this newcomer raised their hand afterwards, and I said that I'm trying to stop smoking, which I was doing. I was trying to stop smoking, which meant, you know, I'd go all day without a cigarette, white knuckling it, and then go to a meeting and then borrow a cigarette from somebody after the meeting and smoke, and then smoke 10 or 20 before I fell asleep that night, and go the next day and do the same thing. Yeah. But I said, you know, I'm trying to stop smoking. And this newcomer, and it's funny, you know what? I saw him a week later with a cigarette, and I haven't seen him in all these decades since. All right, but he talked about that he went down to the beach. He understands what I'm talking about smoking. He went down to the beach and he asked God to help him stop smoking, and he threw away the cigarettes, and he hasn't, you know, he made a decision not to smoke. And it hit me that that's what I hadn't done. I hadn't made a decision that no matter what, I'm not going to pick up a cigarette, you know? So after that, I was able to do that. I made that decision. I asked God for help. Every time when I walked out of a meeting and I saw people smoking and I wanted one, God helped me not to take that first puff. And you know what? I don't remember whether it was a month or 6 weeks, but whatever it was, it wasn't a lot in a lifetime of living, you know, to give up. It was just like that originally not being able to sleep when I first came in 1982. It's not a lifetime of, in a lifetime of living, it's a drop in the bucket to be uncomfortable for a month or something. Because all of a sudden, it just gets to a place where you don't even think about it or want it anymore.
Yeah.
I would feel as bad today if I lit up a cigarette as if I went out and shot a bag of dope, you know?
Exactly,
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark. You had an incredible story. I know this is late at night. I appreciate you coming here. You know, I know you took time out of your day to do this, so I really appreciate you, man.
Well, unfortunately, I was just at a funeral for a friend of mine who I've known in recovery for 38 years. He was a good friend, and it's funny, Vietnam didn't kill him. Drug addiction didn't kill him. But, you know, the only time he was really going out was to go to meetings, and he had been vaccinated and thought he was okay. And, of course, you know, there's a lot of jerks out there that don't want to get vaccinated and don't want to wear masks. And somebody, as his wife said at the memorial today, somebody gave him a few drops of whatever, and he got COVID, and he was 15 days in the hospital fighting to breathe. And, you know, he was younger than me. He was like a year or two younger than me, you know, and...
Yeah, rest in peace, Kenny M.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he sponsored me for a long time. I still hear his voice when I do step work with some of my guys, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see a Vietnam War veteran get clean, and then a Vietnam War drug pusher get clean too.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see that.
Yeah.
All right, well, God bless you, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.